Welcome, everyone. The February 26, 2024 Special Council meeting is called to order at 4 o'clock. This special meeting is a budget meeting convened to consider a report on the 2024 to 2028 draft financial plan. Council would like to acknowledge the Ucluelethat on whose traditional territories the District of Ucluelet operates. Audience members and delegates are advised that this proceeding is being video recorded and broadcast on YouTube and Zoom, which may store data on foreign servers. Are there any late items? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Councillor Hoare,
I'll second.
Councillor Anderson, all in favor? None opposed, that carries. We have one report item this afternoon, 2024 to 2028 draft 5-year financial plan. This verbal report will be presented by the Chief Administrative Officer and accompanied by a PowerPoint presentation. Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Council would have before them a package, and we'll bring up the presentation for the draft financial 5-year financial plan. The presentation utilizes a lot of the slides that were presented in January, so we'll go through those fairly quickly, and just highlighting the changes that were requested by Council at that January meeting. Once we have the presentation up, here we go. So if there are any additional questions, please just jump in and ask for additional clarity or any questions that you might have as we go through these fairly quickly here. So as I previously mentioned, in January we did the first iteration of the financial plan. I have to use two computers. Here we go. So right now we've taken that information from Council, updated the financial plan, and also completed the capital plan and the funding strategy for funding the capital plan, as well as we have the completed roll for 2024 or 2023 completed roll, which gives us the calculations for the tax rate. Potential tax rate calculation for 2024. So this is where we're at in the presentation at this point. The first part of the presentation again will be department overviews for the budget. We'll just run through these really quick. This is the 5-year anticipated spending plan for each of the various departments. So administration, no real changes there. Well, there's two changes as highlighted. Our legal and audit services have gone up substantially from previous years, and this is due to ongoing litigation with respect to a couple of properties and developments that we're working through. Those costs have been coming in higher than anticipated, and we wanted to increase the requisition for future years just to make sure that we have enough within the legal portfolio to fund those ongoing portfolios and discussions on the legal side. In addition, our insurance rates, you'll see that's gone up a little bit as well. We got our numbers in. They went up 10.6% from 2023 into 2024, which is just a cost that we have to absorb. So our insurance costs have then gone up to $134,038 for 2024. No changes within the council, mayor and council portfolio. So still looking at $338,000 for 2024. I'm gonna get used to hitting two buttons here. Planning and development, again, no changes from January. Still about $849,000, and the planning and development is again all of the building inspection, bylaw enforcement, plus all of the planning functions of the organization. Emergency management, again, no changes here, about $508,000. Council remembers we added the rest of the deputy fire chief's wages into that this year, and that's the significant jump from 2023 into 2024. Recreation, again, no changes requested by council. So we're still at just shy of $1.2 million, and this includes all the administration, the UCC, rec hall, recreation buildings, equipment. The main change here is adding in the lighthouse. So we've added $28,000 in 2024 to operate the lighthouse. No, I'm stuck.
Quick question.
Yes.
Is there any chance that we would see any of those legal fees kind of come back to us in the future?
Yes. The legal fees, if we win all our legal challenges, which were, well, so far so good, we get a small portion of it back. Probably when we're looking at the one with the one from 2023, I won't get into the details,
Right.
obviously. Probably 20 or 30,000, maybe.
Right. And
Right.
go in reserves, I suppose.
It goes back into general capital,
Okay.
or sorry, general operating funds.
Right.
Yeah, and then if we don't use it, then it can be transferred over to capital.
Excellent. Thanks.
We're still stuck there, Joey. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Thank you. All right, on to operations. So no significant changes here, although I have put in a placeholder. You'll see on the revenue and the expense side for a potential parking program. This is a revenue in and out, so there's no tax implications, but it's there to ensure that we had it in there if council wants to pursue the parking program in the future. So here's the summary of significant changes again. So this was presented in January. Again, highlighted the legal, insurance, and the parking program. Those are the main changes for going into this round. Any questions? All right.
Can I ask for
Yeah.
some clarity on because I don't remember agreeing to the Chamber of Commerce 35,000. That's just a request.
So thank you. In October of last year, there was a request for that $35,000 to fund their grant application, or not fund. To match whatever their grant application was. So it was a request by council to put $35,000 in there in the event that they're successful with their grant. If they're unsuccessful with their grant application, then these funds would remain within general operating and then again be transferred over to wherever the need is. So if they are successful though, it was agreed upon by resolution of council to fund that $35,000 in this budget, and that's why it's there. But it'll only take effect if they're successful with their grant.
All right. I didn't recall the resolution to fund it regardless. I thought we were just bringing it forward for discussion at budget. My bad memory.
We could take another look at that just to make sure. I know it was brought forward to bring it forward during the budget process. There is an opportunity that we could remove it from this budget if that is the desire of council.
I just really wanted clarity because I couldn't remember that we had actually included it in the budget, and it's a big chunk of change out of the grants and aids.
So this was on top of the existing grants and aid, so it wouldn't reduce the $21,000 and change that are allocated for the general grants and aids, but we were bundling that all into one line item to show council the funding that is being used from tax dollars to fund all of the various requests for council by organizations in the community.
On that note, I sorry to interrupt. I feel like it would be useful to determine. Oh yes. I feel like it would be useful to just confirm if that was actually something that was resolved or just discussed. But on the topic of the grants and aid, I'm wondering if we can hop back and I'm just curious why the number keeps declining every year.
So right now, grants and aid and in-kind contributions, they're holding steady. So we have about $45,000 of in-kind contribution and $21,000 for cash contributions. That is being maintained. Council hasn't directed staff at this point in time to increase those, but they're not going down. So we're not reducing those. It is holding steady.
Well, here on that second slide for 2024, it shows a value of $114,250.
Yes.
That goes down to $80,200. 71,169.
That is because the grant for the requested funding of $35,000 for the Chamber of Commerce grant program is a one-time ask.
Okay. Thank you.
So we can, staff can get some more information, just confirm that resolution, or if it was just direction to consider within the budget. That being said, council can consider at any time or reconsider the allocation of any funds at any point in time until such time as it's actually been awarded. So this would be a good time to have that discussion on whether or not this is something that council wants to contribute to the Chamber of Commerce with respect to that grant application. I know they have put the grant application in with the anticipation that the funds would be available, but council can reconsider that if they so wish.
I believe the grant is for economic development, and it's a joint grant that Tofino, Ucluelet, and Port Alberni put in together, those three chambers, and it's specifically for economic development in those three areas, and the grant was contingent on the municipalities chipping in an equal amount. So it is contingent on whether they get that grant or not, that this money would be payable to them. So that's about all I know. I know the deadline is for them to receive word is very soon, within a month, I think. So we should know really soon if were successful.
Can I just jump in? There were a few things that I wanted to mention today, and we're sort of on the topic of one of them. I'm just hoping to put it out there for discussion that we could at least consider increasing the amount of cash that's available to offer as grant and aid contributions to community groups. It really, I know I wasn't in the room for the meeting, but it really strikes me that in Ucluelet we rely so much on a number of nonprofit organizations that receive funding from so many different sources, but it really seems like the district of Ucluelet isn't contributing all that much in the grand scheme of things. And when we look at this line item compared to, you know, the cost of a truck or the cost of a number of other things that we sort of gloss right over, you know, for a lot of these groups, like an extra couple $1,000s can really make a difference. And that's something that I wouldn't personally mind seeing a little bit more allocated to. I don't know where it would come from, but that's something that I would put to everyone that we could come back and maybe look at together. And if enough people feel the same way, we could see if that's a possibility.
I do know that we have brought forward in the past that we could use some of the Barclay Community Forest money to endow the grants and aid to bump up that number, because an endowment is at least something that would be in perpetuity, be able to, you know, give a little bit more into the community. So that's something that we've talked about for 4 years, but still need to see a financial plan about that. Just saying.
So it's not too late to make adjustments. So that's part of this process. So if there is a desire to see an increase or a change in allocations of funding, this is the time to put those forwards. And then I just need direction from council as to what you would like to do. Mr. Rotenberg has just pulled up the resolution with respect to the Chamber of Commerce Economic Development, and it was, you're correct, Councillor Hoare, it was a referral. It wasn't a dedication, so it'd be referred to include within the budget process. So at this point in time, Council could decide to continue to fund it or not. And then same with the allocation for the grants and aid, if there's a desire to increase that. Any allocation in 1 year, that means once it's been requisitioned from property taxes, that means you don't have to, it'll just be within the budget cycle. So it wouldn't increase requisitions for future years. It would just be a part of the requisition cycle. So we can consider it this year, or we could consider an adjustment in 2025 as well. I just need direction from council if this is something that you want to consider for this year or future year.
I don't know that it seems like this exact moment is the time to do that. I just wanted to put it on the table and have people think about it. And if I'm the only one, then that's fine. And if other people agree, then I think we might have a better opportunity to come back and suggest that change, because I don't want to interrupt the flow of your presentation. But on the record, I would love to see the district setting aside a little bit more money to fund community groups. I think we're really, really lucky to have a diverse group of nonprofits, and I know that all of them are struggling, and it just seems to me that the district could do a little bit more. I'm not saying the district needs to fund everything, but it doesn't seem like a lot of money in the grand scheme of things from this end of the budget, and I know that it's probably a significant amount from the other end for the groups that are looking to get funded. So I'd be in favor, but I don't want to push anything right now and force the issue.
I'll just say that it does seem like a small number compared to the ACRD, that I sit on that board, and they give a lot of money to their nonprofits, but then they have a huge list of them that apply for it. And ACRD has that no double dipping rule, so anybody, a nonprofit that applies to them can't also apply to us or to Fino. They just have that rule. But yeah, our number seems very low compared to theirs.
One thing that staff have been contemplating for the last little while here is to bring a report to council on an overview of all the funding that is provided, including, pardon me as I'm lost from words, for taxation, property tax waiving. I can't remember, tax exemptions, because we do give out tax exemptions as well. We give the in-kind contributions for room usage, which has a cost, and then we have the actual cash contributions. So what we could do in 2024 is bring a report and just bring it all to council before the next budget cycle, so that you can have a full look at the allocations that are coming to the community through all of those different sources, and then council can provide more detailed discussion, or have a more detailed discussion on the issue later on in the year, and then consider any increases or adjustments moving forward into 2025 budget cycle.
I would like to see included in that the information on endowment.
It's a great idea.
Okay.
I would be just on principle in favor of propping that up, grants and aid. But that was my main question, was how do we compare to other jurisdictions? And so that was a good answer you had there. Well, I would agree.
Okay. We'll add that to the list of reports for council for this year. Yeah. No, it's all good. All right. Where were we? Okay, so any other questions on the significant changes or the operations? The next slide. Oh, sorry. These are our operational projects. So I highlighted these. There's a couple of different changes on here. And they're primarily, we received some federal grant funding, and they've been transitioned over from operational costs to grant funded costs. So within this, you'll note under the DCC bylaw update, last time council saw this, it was at 90,000 and staff are recommending bumping that up to 120. This is because we have some federal funding that will help us make this bylaw even more robust and give us some additional insights into amenity cost charges, as well as training and engagement levels. So we think it would be significant value to add those on to it. And the reason that we're looking at this as an opportunity is because it is fully grant funded now. But I think that'll have a significant value for the community when looking at the DCCs and ACCs moving forward.
I got a quick question. It's actually directed to Miss Fortune. Regarding the winter lights, I know that there were a number of them that were, when they were still up last month, that looked like they were damaged. Did that happen? Do we have to replace those? Just
Through the mayor, yes, there were some. You're quite right, and so my staff is working with the company right now, and so we're doing some work on that, and then we're kind of reassessing some of our stuff. This is our first year just to see where things were at, and we've done a little bit of a reassessment as to how we might do some of the winter lights.
thank you.
We're also hoping most of those failures will be covered under a warranty.
Right?
Right, so they'll be hopefully replaced, and we're having discussions as to whether or not those are the right type of lights for our climate, because that's a pretty high failure rate. So maybe doing something else might be worthwhile, but we're looking at it.
That being said, there were a lot of kudos for the way the Village Green looked this winter. So
Yes, it looked fantastic.
The other changes on there, we consolidated the path and heritage sign wayfinding line item, so that didn't change financially, but it's just been consolidated. The subdivision servicing bylaw is again going to be funded through that federal grant that we received. And the lighthouse furnishings, we upped by $10,000 through and that's going to be funded through RMI. So there's no tax implications with respect to any of these line items. This is the summary of the draft 5-year operations summary. So our total budget for this year for operations is 6.4 million, just over 6.4 million. The property tax requisition is 4.479. Now that does not include capital. That is just operations. So that's what we're looking at for this year for our operations program. Is there any questions of council regarding operations? All right, let's keep going. So, I added fun slides this time. So this just gives you an overview of the operational revenue sources, gives you a little bit of a picture of where they're coming from property taxes, business license permits, etc., as well as where the funding that we use is allocated. So 29% administration, and then the next one is recreation at 19%. Public works operations is 15%, and the rest go down from there. Mm-hmm.
Question. So the parking again, that's this year?
Oh, It's an in and an out. So it's it does have an allocation to it, but remember that if it's cost neutral at this point in time.
Got it.
So there's 200 of revenue and 200 of expenses just to hold that line item.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, for Harbor. So no changes in Harbor. Remember, this is a separate cost center. So this is fully funded through its own allocations and through user fees. So we're looking pretty good there. $450,000 worth of revenue, $375 worth of expenses. So we have an annual contribution, a positive balance of $75,000 that goes into a Harbor reserve.
Quick question.
Yes.
The fees that are collected, they're not donations anymore. They're actually fees that the
They're
boats
fees.
pay for the fish hatchery and the search and rescue. That's just an in and out, I would guess. So that's why they're not shown anywhere here.
Yeah, I don't break those out within the budget.
It would be nice to see how much we're actually giving those two organizations.
I'll make a note.
Thank you.
Okay, so our water services. So in 2024, 902,000 is our water service operational budget. Note that I have added in a 4.5% increase starting in 2025. This is to start funding to ensure that we don't run into a deficit within our operations budget for water and sewer. This is still a little bit concerning for us. Water and sewer are supposed to be self-funded with including the capital expenditures. And right now, as you can see, we're just barely holding our own for the operational side. So we need to start looking at the utilities bylaw, and I'd recommend that I suggest that we bring that utilities bylaw back to council and review it. It's very flat right now, so there's no changes. It was implemented a few years ago, and the rates were just flat. So parcel tax was $85 and held at $85 for until it's revisited. So most bylaws now, because everything gets more expensive, has an annual inflator built into it. Is the best practice now. So we should probably do an adjustment within our utilities bylaw and bring those up to date as to actual costs for operations and future capital requirements for our infrastructure, and then build in an annual inflator into those to ensure that we're keeping up to the actual cost of operating our systems.
I thought we just increased water and sewer.
About 3 years ago.
I had a little note with my last utility bill stating that there was an increase. It was just like a month ago.
I'll have to dig into that and get back to council.
Okay. It wasn't a big increase. It was like $15 or something, but it was an increase.
I do recall talking with the finance team that there was an adjustment that they had to make from last year for it. I'll report back to council on it.
Okay, thank you.
Quick question for Dwayne through the mayor. I'm trying to remember what's happening with the water meters in town. Would that be, this is just affecting the flat rate? Or are we collecting data off the meters as well?
No, we are collecting off of meters as well. So there's a very complicated system in play. So there's a flat rate, and then there is the metered rate. So I can bring up the actual calculations on it and show council, but both need to be adjusted and factored in for our operational and capital needs.
All right, thanks.
Okay, into our sanitary system. So our sanitary system, same as we're recommending bringing this back with our utility rates bylaw to reconsider it with our capital requirement needs, and looking at an additional 4.5% increase. That's what council sees within this screen. Through 2025, 6 and 7 and 8 is an annual 4.5% increase. Gives us a little bit more room towards 2028, but still not nearly enough to fund our capital needs for our water service. Or, sorry, I'm on a different side, sanitary service. And that leads us into our capital program. I'll just keep moving through this really quickly if that's good with council. So not a lot of changes within our capital program. We still have our 3/4 ton truck that we're going to place, the dump truck and the backhoe, which is all slated. This is the summary. So 250 for the CAT, 100,000 for the GMC Sierra replacement, and then we have a little bit of a gap in 26, 27 for new vehicles. All of our fleet is slowly being replaced, but it still needs a lot of focus. We are looking at lease opportunities as well as just purchase outright opportunities. So we'll look at how that plays out as the rates come in. For operations, we have a new trailer that we're looking at for the operations team. We found some funding through the 2021 COVID relief funding that we hadn't used yet. So we're planning on utilizing that to fund this. So again, it's not going to be a tax requisition for this, but it'll make our operations department all in one space rather than parks in a small little trailer and the operations crew in another trailer. So it'll increase efficiency and just create a better work environment for our operations and parks team. Amphitrite House is continuing on, so that's that will be built out and fully complete, and hopefully early spring. Municipal buildings, we're starting to focus a little bit more attention on our facilities. We need to start spending a little bit more money on, especially our the municipal office. It's looking pretty worn out there, especially the outside of the building. So we need to start focusing some energy on those allocations. The rec hall replacement plan is in there for this year. As I mentioned, the ATCO trailer is going to be funded through COVID funding. The generator for the UCC has been on the list for a little while now. And then in 2026 is when we're looking at funding the outside of the Leach building. So that's the municipal office. This is the harbor, so this is the Inner Boat Basin Pathway, again funded through RMI and harbor reserves. So no tax dollars going towards this one. And I did make a change on here, so we moved the boat launch up to 2024 as requested by council. And I've reallocated some of the funds within the Inner Harbor Walkway to reflect when we're anticipating spending those resources. But it's the same amount. Yes?
Can we back up to municipal buildings for
Absolutely.
a minute? I had a question about an air conditioning unit. During COVID, we had to hose down the building to keep the vaccines from spoiling, and I think we actually had to cancel one of the clinics. So I know with the new codes, in newer buildings, you have to have at least one room that's air conditioned or can be maintained. I think it might be worth looking at retrofitting an air conditioner to at least some part of this building. In the event that we have a heat dome or whatever, we might want to put that in the plan in the future.
Sure. What I can do is task that back to our Parks and Recreation as well as operations team to take a look at what the opportunities are, and then the future costs, and then look at that in the next fiscal plan in 2025. Because we need to know what the cost implications would be and how we would do it. Yeah.
Am I correct in thinking that a lot of heat pumps can also do air conditioning? I don't know whether for a building of this size, a heat pump would be able to air condition the whole thing, but I agree there should be somewhere that can be a cooling center.
Even if it's one of the meeting rooms, like just in the event of an emergency, that we have that. Especially, I don't know if the seniors home does it have air conditioning? Okay, it does. But the vaccine clinics were the one that really stood out to me, that during that time we had an issue. So it makes sense to be prepared, as it's only going to get hotter.
Exactly.
And potentially, if we have any newer buildings coming down the line at Tugwell Field, say, potentially it could go in there instead, just so that we have one place in the community that we can use as an emergency shelter.
One thing I just realized talking about new buildings, so council will note that the rec hall replacement is within the financial plan. So there is a social reserve fund that was unbeknownst to myself previously, that has just under $2 million in it that we're using to fund part of the recreation requests this year. But half of that, so 1.5 of that rec hall replacement is from the social reserve, and another 1.5 is through the Barclay Community Forest funding at this point in time. Now, obviously, we'll be looking at grant opportunities to offset these costs, and Ms. Fortune is currently undertaking the design RFP process to get a clear idea of what that facility would look like, and can include, heating, cooling. It'll be obviously a new building, so we can contemplate all of that within that new design. We're also looking at it as another opportunity for a shelter space, depending on where the budget comes in and if it's post-disaster funding available for it, to make sure that there's another space that we could potentially use in the event of an emergency. We actually had that conversation this afternoon. Was there any other questions about municipal buildings? All right. So just to highlight again that one additional change in the harbor walkway. Again, that's funded through RMI and the Harbor Reserve funds, and the adjustment here that council's seeing is just a reallocation of the same funds presented last time in the anticipated years that we'll be spending them. As council has probably seen and heard, the Village Green Playground is underway. So far so good. It's looking pretty good. They're digging holes and putting up uprates. As well as we have the fully funded washrooms that we're installing. We're doing an RFP right now and just working out the details for those. So under Parks and Trails, again, the major change here, or the only change, is adding in the skate park expansion. So there's a request to add funding in there. We put it into 2025 as a potential funding item. And council will also note that I added $320,000 in there. I have allocated that as grant funding, so that's not a tax requisition fund. That is a placeholder for that'll be contingent upon availability of grants to fund it. But it is in there, and it'll move out or in depending on the availability of funding for that type of project.
Can I ask you a quick question about that?
Yeah.
I remember we talked about this briefly before. I'm just trying to remember. The Pass and Milford Trail,
Mm-hmm.
is that just the one that goes between the two properties down to the beach there? Or is this the connection that goes on to the Wild Pacific Trail?
I'm going to pass that one over to my Director of Community Services.
Fancy. Through the mayor, yes, that is the pathway between the two houses, but it does connect with the Wild Pacific Trail.
All right.
Yeah, so that's something that we're looking at.
Is that beside the new build that's on?
Yes.
Okay, I know
Yeah.
what you're talking about. Excellent. Thanks.
Okay, so affordable housing. So we're still waiting on hearing whether or not our grant ask for our social housing is going to be approved or not. We're still hopeful, but we're still waiting to find out. So that the affordable housing for 175 is dependent on that grant funding coming forward. So we'll see what happens there. Lot 13 continuing. We're just waiting on BC Housing for an assigned agreement, so that's moving forward as well. The one discussion item was still the water tower lot. So I do have that funded partially through affordable housing and partly reserves. So it's I've put it in as a placeholder for 2025. Sorry, I have to move to the next slide. It is a discussion that could be funded partially from affordable housing, but only if it's determined that that site could be funded or could accommodate affordable housing. So it's I'm not sure how comfortable I am putting it and funding it through there. I'd probably recommend that we fully fund it through another source. And if that is the case, then this is tax requisition no, it's a tax requisition. So I need a little bit of direction on what you want to do with this one. Currently, it's 50-50 between tax and possibly affordable housing. But in all honesty, I'm a little leery about using affordable housing funding just because of the nature of that site. Even though it'd be great to create affordable housing there, I don't know. I think it's a stretch. So we could keep this in the budget as a placeholder and fund it through general capital or general operation reserves and just hold on to it, or direction from council as to what you would like to do with this one.
At the end of the day, that site for affordable housing doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense, and I would hate to use affordable housing funds to look into it. Now, let's say the report comes back and says, definitely not, there's no way you can do it. What would be then the plan for that lot? Would we be selling it and putting the funds into affordable housing? That's where I could say, okay, we'll use affordable housing funds to do the research, and if it comes back that it's too high a value, then what we can get out of that value goes back, at least refunding the affordable housing fund. Just throwing it out there.
Right. So right now, the $200,000 estimate would give us a full assessment of the site, including how to get the road up there, water, sanitary, what the potential uses of the sites are. It would add a lot of value to the site, because then we could, if it can't be used internally for us to actually action it, then we would be able to put it out to the world to sell it, and then utilize maybe a portion of the revenue from the sale of the lot to fund additional affordable housing elsewhere, land purchases elsewhere in the community. So there's a lot of different options that could be created by doing this assessment. Right now, we just know it's on the hill slope. It's hard to get up to. We'd need to buy a piece of land to get access to it. And it's going to sit there until we actually do the investigation. So it could be valuable to undertake this work to find out what we could do with the site and then make a decision as to where we want to go. I don't believe we would be able to utilize affordable housing fund to do the assessment work. We'd have to show that it was affordable housing initiative to get clearance to use those funds. So we could use operational surplus or reserve to fund it, and then make a decision to action this item moving forward and figure out what we want to do with the site. So I'd probably recommend we use our reserve funding to do the investigation at the time when council is interested in actually dealing with the property. So I wouldn't do it spend 200,000 in 2025 if council were not thinking about doing anything with it until 2027. Like do it in the same year so you can clear that cost near to the time of the expenditure.
I agree with that.
Yes, we own so little municipal property. It would be really good to know what can be done with that junk up there.
So what I'm hearing from council is keep this in the budget, look at alternate sources, and then is there an indication from council as to what year you would like us to focus on that? I put it into 2025 because 2024 didn't have a chance of getting to it. But is it a priority for 2025 or 2026? And I can adjust it as, or leave it where it is.
I'd like to sort of, before allocating funds to it, sort of see what the plan A and plan B is for the outcomes of that report. Because as you mentioned, spending 200,000, if we don't have a clear path to what we would do with it, depending on what the results are. Like if it comes back as doable for affordable housing, then that's option A. What's option B? I just don't want to throw the money away and then just have the land sit there. So if we do execute the work, spend the money, then we should follow through with either plan A or plan B after the fact, and knowing what those two options are, so that we can proceed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was actually hoping to have this in 2024, but from what I'm hearing, we're lacking capacity to do that.
Yeah, with the amount of work that is before our planning department, because this is a planning function to really take a look at this site, with the next 6 months, 8 months fully booked with the new legislative implications on housing, we thought, in all honesty, we couldn't present this to council in 2024 with a straight face saying we're going to get to it. So we can leave it in 2025 and action that with a report back to council as to what are the options once we fund the investigative work. And we'll bring something back to council for consideration.
Fair enough.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so that gets on to Peninsula Road, which is moving along. That's existing project. So no, other than work is progressing and it's looking pretty good so far. We'll continue on with Peninsula Road. Larch Road multi-use path. That one should be community should start seeing work on that in the next 2 weeks. And that'll be a 2-month project. So it's going to be a busy spring with project work in the community. For roads, no changes in our capital requisitions for roads at this point in time. Again, for protective services, so the major request this year is for the $200,000 for the SCB replacements, which are 1992 era. We just can't get parts anymore. We just have to replace them. So not really an option, unfortunately. I also note there that engine 2 is up for replacement. So we have a budget in there for $800,000 for the replacement of that piece of equipment. That is at the end of its legal use life at 25 years, and we can't extend it without having insurance implications. So it's a must-do, unfortunately. So no changes from the last time for the capital budget for emergency services. Water treatment system, again, we're moving forward with those projects. You will note that on the water service line, we've, as I mentioned previously, I bumped it up to 1.3 million is our updated costing for that. We are in discussions with the province and that government and looking for alternate sources of funding to help offset some of these costs. It is a fully funded project at this point in time, but we're looking for other sources to take that out of the grant funding allocations that we have that we can use for other projects. So our total water capital, we're looking at 1.9 in 2024 and $4.5 million in 2025 and 26. That is, a large portion of that is due to the water treatment plant that we're looking at implementing. So that is that $9 million worth of grant funding that you're seeing there. That's why those numbers are so high. Sanitary. This one is a problem file for us moving forward. There is a lot of sanitary projects that we need to fund, and they're piling up. And unfortunately, there's no grant funding for them. So this is one of the challenging portfolios that we're going to be discussing. I have a slide regarding borrowing coming up shortly that will really highlight some of the challenges that we're facing right now. And this is just an idea of where our capital expenditures are coming from and the funding sources. So 54% right now is from provincial grants, another 24% from federal grants, and then we start digging into our own reserves and operational reserves and then debt funding. So this is just 2024. And again, I'll show you another slide later on that presents the overall impacts of our funding moving forward and some of the challenges that we have. So this is our capital summary. It looks like I got them out of order here for, sorry. So this is our total capital plan, $9.59 million for 2024. A lot of these funds, again, are from federal and provincial grants. So, and just a reminder of how our capital projects are funded. So, we plan those over the 5 and 20-year capital plan. We look at any unused operational funding that can go back into our reserves to fund them. We dedicate contingency funding within the operational cost centers, and then the contingency funds are transferred to reserves at the end of the fiscal year. So, unfortunately, our reserves at the end of the fiscal year are very, very small, and they're not fully funding our capital requirements. So one of the asks that for council this year is to consider increasing or actually allocating funds to our capital program on an annual basis. Our current borrowing situation right now, we have $2.973 million in that we're borrowing. Most of all these prices are locked in for our percentages. So the Ucluelet Community Center, that's 1.47 right out till 2036. So that's really good. The equipment loans are variable, so those go up and down depending on what's happening in the world of loans. So not too bad looking at our actual borrowing. But then we get on to what it looks like in the future, and this is obviously concerning. These are after allocations usage of our reserve funds with the limited amount that there are. And as council will see, it stacks up pretty quick. We're going to be looking at borrowing for the excavator and the 3/4 ton for equipment or leasing, depending on what those rates look like. And then we go up to $2.18 million. We have that Hemlock lift station, which is about $1.2 million that we need to borrow. And the engine 2 replacement, again, that's not an option for us. And what we're running into the problem that we're running into is that we don't have enough in our reserve funding, and these projects tend not to be grant-funded opportunities. So there are no grants that will fund the replacement of an existing fire engine. There's nothing that will give us a funding or a grant opportunity to replace or make upgrades to existing infrastructure on the Hemlock lift station, etc. So, and this just forecasts out the farther out we go. In 2027, you'll notice it goes up to 9.4 million. There's that 6.6 million that we have for the fire hall. Again, this is a very old building that's just not meeting our operational needs. We have to figure out how to deal with these opportunities or challenges. Welcome some discussion or comments from council on this. We can continue to push these out, but that continues to build up and make it more expensive for the community as we're doing emergency repairs rather than being proactive in our repair plans for our existing infrastructure. Welcome some discussion on this slide. It's there's a lot of implications here.
The fire hall replacement, I think there was a grant last year that we applied for and didn't get it. So they do come up occasionally, but not frequently.
That was the very first grant I've ever seen for anything with emergency services for a fire hall. So that's the first I've ever seen it. Hopefully it comes back, and we will definitely look out for those opportunities. I'm just not going to count on them.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything in the new legislation about using ACCs for this? Because I understand there's like some flexibility happening there and some discussions about alternative uses than was traditionally allowed.
Absolutely, that's a great question and point. Yes, there are. So as new developments come online, and once we have the new DCC ACC bylaw adopted by council, any new developments will have development cost charges and amenity cost charges associated with those. So those are predetermined within our master plans and requirements of the community as we grow. So yes, new developments will yield funding that can go towards this, but you'd have to have the development to fund it, and we need the bylaw in place before that development happens. So that'll go to parks, fire, emergency services, recreation, as well as road, sewer, water, storm, which are the normal ones that we do have DCCs for right now, is the water, storm, sewer, and roads. But we don't have anything that didn't exist yet for like fire and parks.
So are we looking ahead to that fire hall with that in mind when we're talking about overhauling our DCC bylaw and
At this
and
point,
getting it?
At this point in time, this is fully funded, contemplating that we need to borrow. Now, if everything falls into place and we finally see the legislation, because we're still waiting for it for the ACCs, then these numbers will decline. So if we can find an alternate source for funding these, we will do so, and that will be the task of staff, the senior management team and managers moving forward, is to look at every opportunity to reduce the debt requirements and find other sources of revenue. But at this point in time, if we have to have a balanced budget. We can't present a unbalanced budget or a budget in deficit to the community. We're not legally allowed. So we have to show it as borrowing until such time as we can find an alternate means of funding these. The only other thing that we can do is postpone the projects outside of the 5-year financial plan. I did not want to do that because then council and community lose sight of what is required moving forward. Any other questions? Right. We'll keep going. So this is the sort of pictorial summary of what we're looking at, and you can see towards the end of the slide there, we have a lot of provincial, federal grants right now that help support a large part of our capital investments. But the farther out we get, especially looking at 26, 27, 28, you can see that the proportion of debt funding goes up significantly. So again, if we can find other sources, DCCs, ACCs, we will use those, and that requirement will come down. but we can't count on it. We have to have these pieces of infrastructure replaced, because if we don't do it proactively, we're going to be doing it reactively, and those costs are just going to skyrocket. So this is where we get into the implications of the tax requisitions. So what we are looking at, and for the council and community, is the municipal requisition. So we're not looking at or contemplating the ACRD, school, police, library requisitions for this year. So this is just contemplating what we need for the municipal operations side and capital requirements. A couple of things on BC assessment. As council will know, that BC assessment evaluates the value of land and improvements every year. This year, BC assessment came back, and 994 of the properties went down in assessed value, so between 0 and negative 14%. So they declined in value. Another 371 went between 0 and 12%, and then we have a few that are that 13 to 25 and 25 to 50%. Now, that 50%, 25 to 50% usually it's a new build. It's bare land going to a new home, or somebody added a major renovation or something, added short-term rental to their dwelling, added an ADU to their land. So those changes there are reflect those increased values for their property. So the property owners made some significant investments into those 46 properties. That is correct.
One more time. I thought that was interesting. That's the total number of residential properties in Ucluelet, if you add those four up.
This is these are the properties, residential properties.
Right.
Yeah. So this next slide here, sorry, get both of them. These are the changes in business values. Oh, so this is a change in residential assessed value, and then this is the business assessed value. So businesses had a different take. So they've come back up, and we did some background research on this. So this is returning the business's assessed value back to where it was when they were were it took a downturn in 2021 with COVID. So now they're back up to where they were assessed 2 years, 3 years ago. So this is just the full recovery of that adjustment that happened back in 2021. But it is significant. Council will note and keep these numbers in mind when we go through the tax implications, because the assessed value changes that requisition and how much is due, and the impact to individual residential properties or businesses. This is the average assessed completed roll, right? So we had 183 vacant lands, 800 single family, 479 strata properties or other properties. So slight adjustments in there. Those occur because they transition from like a single family home to a strata, or they've gone to business. So things change within the on how BC assessment looked at the property. So those are reflected in the different values. You can see on the far right there from 2020 moving forward to 2024, and under the So if there's any questions, this just gives you an overview of what that role looks like moving into 2024. And this is what we use to determine what the property tax requisition will be for any given property. We had some non-market changes this year, $23 million worth of residential non-market changes, and $4 million in business residential or business non-market changes. So that adds additional new revenue to the municipality. So We have $57,000 in new tax dollars coming into the municipality, and almost 38,000 through businesses through non-market changes. This is just increases in valuation of any given property. So this slide here provides council with a overview of what we looked at. This is just a little bit of background research on what other communities are doing. So island municipalities, so Campbell River, Comox, Courtenay, Cumberland, Nanaimo are looking at about a 3.5 to 9.7% increase in property taxation this year, within what we think is about a 7.3% average is what most municipalities are looking for. We thought it would also be valuable to take a look at what RMI communities, so other resort municipalities, are doing, and that's between that 5 and 9%, with an average of 6.9% increase for this year. So that's just for general information for council and the community to see what others are doing. So here's where we get into the nitty gritty. So what I've done is split out the requisition that we're requesting council give consider to based on previous direction of council. And then I split it out between the operational requisition and then the water and capital investment. Now, if council will recall at the last meeting, I was talking about a 3% for water, 3% capital. With an idea that it would be about $120,000 or thereabouts for each of those. Now, once I got the new numbers in for the BC assessment, that changed quite substantially, and I think it would be inappropriate to present a full 3% as the base because I was looking at that $120,000 number. So what I presented to council and in the next slides is based on $150,000 value. This is where percentage points really throw things off. So I'm using the flat rates here is 150 for water and 150 for capital. And I want to remind council that this is a requisition that we're proposing to do on an annual basis. So every year would add 150 in water, 150 in capital to compound that requisition, which will help us offset the needs to borrow. Now, I've drafted the budget based on having this $300,000 of dedicated capital investment year after year for the length of the financial plan. So the borrowing that council saw previously is not offset by this amount. So if we want to reduce that borrowing capacity, then we have to look at the column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the black columns. Right, we're looking at $250,000 for water, $250 for capital investments, or wherever council would like to go. And we'll come back to this slide for further discussion. But at this point in time, the tax requisition is at an estimated 8.63% for residential and 7.04% for businesses. Businesses down a little bit, and I did that deliberately because of the significant adjustment in the business class rates and the assessment. So they're going to feel it a little bit more or a lot more this year because their assessed value went up. And the residential went down. So that will impact businesses on have a greater impact on businesses compared to residences when we do the actual requisition. So normally we try to keep those right in par at even, and I can make that adjustment. It'd mean that businesses would increase the cost to businesses and decrease residential. But as you'll see in the later slides here, that impact is quite large already for businesses. So on this slide is our classes, that 8.63. So this is on an average, on the average 2023 assessment and average 2024 assessment. So in residential, on average, if everything is flat, the percent change for residential would be down 0.33%, and the allocation request would be a $300 request for property taxes on an average home of $772,000 for that 8.63%. Utilities, you'll note that there is a big jump in utilities. This is BC Hydro and TELUS. So we were not charging them as much as we could. So I've maxed that out. We're only allowed to charge 2.6 times the business class rate, or $40 per thousand of assessed value. And in previous years, or last year, we didn't charge that. So it was quite substantially lower. And there's no reason for us not to charge the maximum rate to BC Hydro and TELUS. So I'm proposing that we actually up that to the maximum of allowable under the requisition laws. Light industrial, minor changes there, 2.88 increase. Business rate, this is where you'll see the big jump, 14.12 for businesses with an assessed value of $461,000. And then recreational class is at 10.78 as well. So a little bit bigger jumps in those because their assessed values went up comparatively to residential class. And please jump in if there's any questions.
Example. I don't know. I'm gapping out here. Hey, what's an example of a recreational class?
Yeah, well, yeah, Salmon Beach, but they're not in our jurisdiction. It would be campground. No, that would be business. I'd have to dig that one. We only have a couple of properties that are deemed recreational class. I'd have to look it up for you.
Whale watching or something like that?
No, that would be a business.
Business?
That would be a business. So it's very specialized. We don't have a lot of properties in there, and as you can see, it's the average is $178,000. I could dig up an example for you. I don't have one at hand.
Okay, thanks.
So Council and Community has seen this slide before. So it's the impacts on property tax requisitions on residential properties and businesses comparative to what BC assessment assessed your residential or your business at. So this first slide gives you, I've tried to pick out the entire range of adjustments that are made, and I'm going to go back really quickly here to these two slides. So I've tried to capture that 0 to 14% downward trend, the 0 to 12, 13 to 25, and 25 to 50%. So just keep those numbers in mind and note that the 994 of the properties had a decrease in value when looking at these requisitions. So the vast majority are in that negative trend, with only some at that 0 to 12 and quite a limited number that are in the upper ends, right? And then same with businesses, although you can see right in the middle there, the vast majority are that 0 to 23% increase in assessed value, with some outliers at that 40 to 55%. So I'm going to jump back ahead here. So what this is showing council is that this property here, the very first one, was assessed at $973,000 in 2023. It was reassessed at $842,000, so a drop 13.46%, which means that the tax requisition for this property based on that 8.63 would be an additional $39. Compare that to a couple down. So one that is completely flat, no change. And yes, this property actually exists. $878,000. There was no change from 23 to 24. This requisition for based on 8.63 would be $348. And then down at the bottom, we have a property that went from 836 to 1.164. a 39% increase in assessed value, and that's where it compounds. So it went up $1,200 if we council proceeds with this one. Now, going back to that original slide, there's a very few number of these properties, but they do exist, and they should be acknowledged that this is an impact that would be quite significant for some of these larger properties with substantial increases in property value. So a few more examples. So for manufactured homes, I had a couple of examples here. One went up 78% change, but that only increases their property tax requisition by $162, and that's because of the total value of the home. Another one went down 3.46%, so $79 difference in property tax requisition this year. A duplex, as you can see there, I won't run through every single one of these, but it just to give council an idea of what these impacts are. So the land, this piece of land went from $443,000 to $874, 97% increase in valuation, and their taxes are going to reflect that substantial increase in value.
Question, why would land double like that?
Rezoning. Could be rezoning, is usually the primary one.
Side of the taxes either, right? So this is just municipal. So
This is just municipal. And you're not seeing the other requisitions because we haven't received all of them yet. But it's really important. It's dangerous to contemplate our tax requisition needs when looking at others, because they're going to requisition it regardless and make sure that they're funding their capital and operational needs, to whatever their need is. We need to do the same. And this is where we can get into a lot of trouble if we start looking at it like, oh, there's too much going over to this other level of government, so we should not fund our capital infrastructure needs. And that's where we get into this position where we're at now, when we have this massive deficit where we're going to be paying for it one way or the other moving forward, right? Where am I here? So this one is on businesses. Now, this is, again, most of the businesses went up significantly in their assessed value, and you can see the adjustments there and the changes and implications accordingly. So remember, business class rate is right now at 3.6 times that of residential, and the reason that businesses are charged at an inflated rate or an increased rate or multiplier is because they have an income source. So businesses have a way to earn revenue where residential properties and homeowners do not. So there is a value in that all municipalities use. Ours is about average for small communities. There are larger urban centers with a huge business base use lower multipliers, but we're in line with other municipalities, with small rural municipalities at 3.6. So you can see that down at the bottom one, it is pretty scary. They're $986,000, but their property value went up to $2,326,000. So 135% increase in their valuation for their BC assessment, and their tax requisition goes up substantially for that. So, but at the other end, 866 went down to 805, and the change at 8.63% requisition would be $37. Absolutely, yeah.
So I'll repeat that. That must be a pretty major upgrade to that business on the last line.
I would suspect that this is a vacant parcel of land that has been developed with a business on it. Is likelihood what it is. I try not to say which properties it is. I do know which one it is, and yeah, they can afford this. I would imagine by the building that's there, would be my guess, anyways. So this is the last slide of tax implications. So this one is trying, as you've seen in previous years, council might remember, we've used some standard properties to show year after year the implications. That's this group right here. So we have a restaurant. They went up 2.86%. So this requisition would increase by $410. The general business, again, substantial increase. It went up 40% in value, back to, again, what we were looking at a couple of years ago in their original assessments in 2020 and 2021. So that's quite a substantial change in their tax requisition this year. There was another bed and breakfast, which actually went down in value. So they'll see a decrease in their tax requisition. And then what I did is there's split class houses with short-term rentals is what these last three provide an overview with council. So these are adjustments that went up and down, and you can see the substantial difference in residential went down 3.97%, but their business went up 21% in value. So that adjusts in their property tax requisition this year. So it changes things dramatically on the business and the residential side. So that's the budget and the tax implications. Now I'm going to go back. Right there. So I said I would return back to this one, and this is where I'd love to have a discussion with council. Right now, as I've been indicating, we looked at or proposing an 8.63% increase in taxation. That would translate to 7.04% on businesses. Is this where council is comfortable landing? Looking at the borrowing that we need moving forward, it'd be remiss of myself not to advocate for giving good consideration to increasing this and looking at the other plan. And I can show you actually the tax implications on all those properties. I can bring up a spreadsheet where council can play with it a little bit to see what those impacts are. If council is interested in considering looking at adding more revenue into dedicated water capital and general capital investments. So I'd like council to at least give it some consideration. Is this somewhere that you'd want to go or take a look at?
Councillors?
Can I ask, do you know offhand what the percent increase in residential was last year? Off the top of your head?
9.56, I believe. 9.65? 9.65.
We didn't get tarred and feathered last year.
No, we didn't.
So throw it on again.
I'll just.
You know who's first, right?
Yeah.
So let's,
As I mentioned I kind of threw it out there at the very end of the last presentation of, doing, capturing the capital investment that we need all at once. And I know there's no real appetite for doing that because we'd need to bump it up like 20%, and that's not realistic. The sooner we make up the deficit for our capital funding, the more we will save the community, because all of that borrowing includes, if it's not a short term, it's like 5.6% on top of the borrowing that you're making. So you have to fund that one way or the other. So you're going to borrow the money and then pay the banks the interest for the privilege of borrowing. Now, the more we reduce that means the more we're actually saving the community by not having to borrow. Now, we will have to borrow at a certain point, but the farther out we can push this, gives us more room and impacts the community less. I can't see interest rates going back down to 1% or 2% anytime soon. So we have never as a community allocated sufficient funds to our capital replacement program. Last year, we, as council will remember, I allocated $100,000 plus the $100,000 for the water project. That's it. That's the first time there was a dedicated amount that went into our capital replacement plan. We need to rectify this. And as previously mentioned, that 150 and 150 that is presented there, that 1.77 each on water and capital, is needed just to hold our own in the existing financial plan, and that includes all of that borrowing. So if we don't increase the allocations to capital, then we're going to be borrowing that amount eventually, which means that we're paying 5% on top of it for the length of that borrowing term.
I think that's a pretty key point, and I think it's tempting to overlook that in conditions where interest rates are really low and you're sort of like, well, we can kind of have a free ride right now, so why not? But at the end of the day, I think the focus here is on what's sustainable and what's in the best interest of the community rather than what's going to, please people in the short term. And I think that last point is pretty key in terms of informing my own personal opinion, which is that all we'd be doing by trying to limit how high we go now, like all we're doing is kind of like burdening our future selves for a temporary benefit, and it's a false benefit. So I don't see much point in trying to. I'd say that, like, raising aggressively now makes more sense to me than inevitably having to do that later in conditions that might be even worse.
I think it comes down to best practices as well, and unfortunately previous councils haven't seen far enough into the future to actually put money aside for capital replacement. But I think it's a good thing for us to do now.
Through the mayor, I agree with what you're saying. I think it may be a decent time to do that as well. Just when you look at the numbers of like 0 to 14% that had the negative, like it was over 900 homes, residences that had the lower valuation from BC Assessment. So it looks like if there was a time that this might be it, and there's no crystal ball to see what's going to happen with the economy later on in the back half of this year, but there are some predictions that rates could go up. Mm-hmm. So yeah, no, I agree. I think like if the assessments are down right now for the majority, it might be the least.
Yeah, it'll take the sting out, but it still has to happen. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas if property values go up next year and we do the same thing, it's going to hurt a lot more.
I would, pardon me, I would add that what we do now, or what council does now, compounds, right? And it compounds in the positive direction and the negative. So by increasing the allocations to our capital requirements now means that we're benefiting from that from this day, from this tax cycle moving forward. The same is in reverse. So if we keep pushing it backwards, means that we don't benefit from that compounding allocation into our capital program. So it does have direct positive and negative ramifications by postponing it one more year, looking at it in future and saying, yes, we got to do this, but let's push it off one more year. That actually we've lost this year's and now we have to increase it next year, and we don't know what those assessments are going to do next year. So there are multiple ramifications to this that should be contemplated. Would council be interested in seeing some, like I have a spreadsheet that can show the live numbers as we play with them based on these, because we can go, those numbers are not written in stone. Those are your only options. It's like everything from, what's presented right now or greater or anywhere in between. If there's a number that you would like to hit, we can show you what those what the implications are.
I'm pretty happy with these numbers, personally.
I pretty much have to say that the numbers in brown, I mean, that's kind of your starting point. I'm with everybody else. The whole thing about compounding is that you need to start early. It's, the classic thing. If you save that money when you're 20, you'll have a lot more when you retire than if you start saving at 50. So, same applies for taxes, and not having money in our budget for capital projects and water projects, and having water mains blow and big hunks of infrastructure that need to be replaced. It's scary, and there isn't a lot of grant money out there for it. And so starting to collect a little bit, I think we need to do it. And I say that as somebody whose assessment went up. So
I think it's it's a reality of living in a small town with a limited tax base, and this is just the start of a lot more tax hikes in the future, because we can't grow fast enough to offset the increases in infrastructure for the town this size. So, I mean, holding it off is just going to get exponentially worse. And I'm with you, Jen. Mine went up just a little bit. Like, it didn't even have to go up for it to. It's going to suck. But that's the reality, is that we need the money to run the town.
And people do, I think, I have had people say to me, like, they know that there's not money to do a lot of these things, and they appreciate that we grant right and do the best we can to try and get money from other places. But the bottom line is there's a lot of stuff that we have to go to taxes to get. I'm sorry, but that's a fact.
Well, and on top of that, the community is asking us for these things, that they want these services. So there's a cost to those services. So in effect, when they're asking us for those services, they're asking for tax increases. So
Give the people
what they want.
There is the possibility, if we do implement a pay parking scheme, that could augment the money for infrastructure, because we'd be free to do anything we want with that money.
I'd be happy with this as a minimum, and if there was appetite to increase further, I wouldn't be the one opposing it.
Can we take? There's a public session
Yeah.
to happen. Maybe we need to float it. Maybe, when I'm sitting here worried about what the community thinks about these things, maybe they're on board with something more robust. So maybe we need to ask them.
It will be interesting to see what the public feedback comes back at. And just to put it out there, the budget public feedback period starts today and ends on March 29th. Budget materials and feedback forms are available at ucluelet.ca/community/finance/budget, and also available at the district office at 200 Main Street. Feedback can be submitted to the office or by email to communityinput@ucluelet.ca. Feedback received by the deadline will be presented on a council agenda and form part of the public record. So just be careful what you say. Any other questions for staff?
I don't have a question, but just to further on what you were just saying, Councillor Rafty, is I think I would be in favor of a slight raise if it took the pain away later, but it would have to be based on that public consultation, and if there were people that were saying, hey, look, like we're really hurting, we can't pull it off, and temper it that way. It makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. I just think it's important that people understand that this isn't a cash grab. Like this money's not being spent on something frivolous. I think the decision is, if we can afford to do it now, we need to understand that it's going to benefit us more than if we do it later. And on top of that, separate to that, it might be harder to afford it later. So those two things independently both suggest that this is the time to raise as much as we can. And there's never going to be a time where it's like, oh yeah, this is fantastic. Like I don't think this is ever going to be a popular or pleasant thing, but I feel like it makes more sense now than it very likely will in the future. So as long as people are aware of that, I think that anyone who's lived here and continues to want to live here for the long term is going to see the advantages, and that sort of falls under our responsibility and district staff's responsibility to just communicate this material to the public, because I think the average person is going to be like, well, if you're asking me if I want to pay more taxes or less, like no one's ever going to say more, so I think if people understand that's the question that's on the table, then I would hope that people would have the wherewithal to make a responsible decision. And you're right, there could be people who are like, look, this is going to be a deal breaker for me. But looking at the numbers, I think it's going to be a pretty small proportion of folks for whom this is going to be a deal breaker. I think it's going to be annoying for a lot of people and maybe tricky for others. But I don't think too many people are gonna. This isn't gonna be the straw that breaks the camel's back. But that's something that we should hear and we should know before we make a decision. So
The problem with the way it's calculated is it's kind of arbitrary, because you can't take your equity to a grocery store. So if your property value went up, it doesn't mean you're doing better. It doesn't mean you have more money in your pocket to pay these things. So it's a little strange the way it's calculated, because it's not needs based, or it's just, hey, lucky you. Your values went up and your neighbors went down, so you're on the hook. That's just my feelings. I never liked it.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. There's all these things that are kind of going through my mind. Like, definitely, it seems the majority of the residences, anyway, looking at that number, have gone down by BC assessment, so that would obviously make that less painful. But then I start, in the back of my head, the wheels are turning about things down the road when, we see some of the zoning changes that are happening in the new legislation and the potential for, and I don't know, and even the guy from BC Assessment, Graham Held, he didn't know either. He said that's just something that has to play out and see how it goes. But that is sort of in the back of my head. Property values could go up a little bit in the future as well. So, which does reinforce the idea that maybe to do it now might make a little more sense than things going up in the future. Just thoughts.
I think that I don't want to go on and on, but I also think that at least here as counselors, our responsibility is to look out for the community as a whole. I know I'm often up here advocating for the individual, and I'm often thinking about, okay, well, how does this decision affect the individual? But for something like this, I really do think that we need to look out for the best interests of the town as a collective. And at the end of the day, I mean, the housing market, the property market, like it's a free market. And I'm not, I would hate to think that someone is going to find themselves in a situation where, they're struggling to make ends meet here. But at the end of the day, the market's going to do what it's going to do. Values are going to do what they're going to do. And it's not for us to buffer that and protect people at the expense of the whole community. And so if someone's in a situation where, their property value doubles, and you're right, it's like, well, that really sucks. There's nothing to prevent that individual from cashing out and downsizing or dealing with the challenges that they're facing in their own way. But I'm not sure that it's good practice to say, well, let's take that minority and protect them at the expense of the entire community 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road. You know, like our infrastructure is still gonna need replacing no matter what such and such's house did from one year to the next.
Any other comments from council? Closing comments, Mr. Lawrence?
More of clarity on direction from council. So right now, the slide deck presentation as presented here is based on that 8.63. If I am hearing council correctly, that you're comfortable going to the other scenario, requisitioning 250,000 each for water and the capital, dedicated capital funding, which would be about 10.74 for residential and 8.22 or 8.3 for business. Is this the requisition that council is leaning towards?
I think we're leaning toward the 8.63 and 7.04. Am I correct?
Not for me.
You would go higher?
I would go higher than that, and I would go higher than that because that only puts the 150 into the water and capital, and that is a placeholder. That is not compounding anything for the future. That is not decreasing our ability to, or our need to borrow in the future. That would require, maybe it isn't full 250, maybe it's 200,000 in each. You know, I don't know what those numbers come out at, 9.6 residential and 7.8-ish business. But yeah, we do need to be putting money into those two funds, which we wouldn't be in the 8.63 and 7.04 scenario.
Is anyone else leaning toward the 250,000?
I'd move in that direction myself.
Yeah,
As would I.
I would too.
So we would need to see what the next slides would come out at.
I can show you what those look like right now if council would like.
Sure.
So and just so you have an idea, so I'm going to get Joey to share, hook me up through Zoom, but at an additional 100,000, so 50 and 50, it would mean 9.71 for residential and 7.64 for business. At
So you've been promoted now, just have to go on to accept the promotion.
okay, 1 second. Where is that? Join as panelist. All right.
And I'll just stop sharing the screen at this point. So
Okay.
would you like-
While you're doing that, I guess one thing that I just throw out there is I think psychologically it's like that if that's the minimum, that's already factored in. So really what we're talking about is just the jump up another 1 or 2%. It's not the difference between 0 and 10. It's the difference between 9 and
8.63
8.6 and
yes.
9.71 or whatever. So it's like really it's what we're getting for a little bit is a lot. And I think that's the thing. It's not a dramatic jump up, but it will have significant consequences.
Well, and I think it's about 1% of taxes for about 50 grand, give or take, right? So
35,000.
Do you want to put the other one up there? I was up there for a minute, Joey.
Yeah, 2% of
Do I need to reshare?
Yeah, share your
another $200 on
Yeah.
1476.
Yeah, that's
It's
correct,
not
actually.
I don't think that's like a deal breaker
to get us out of the weeds.
Yeah.
Okay.
No one's gonna be thrilled, but I think it makes. Anyway, that's just.
All right. So what I'm showing, so this is the tax rate calculation spreadsheet that we use to determine all of the different classes. Let me just, maybe I can zoom in just a bit more for you. No, too far. How's that? Okay, there we go. So what we're looking at right here, so this number here is the base operational requisition that we need for our general operations. So this number here, the 500 that I've put here, is what it would be for the capital requisition. And then this is the implication. So right now for the 8.63 is 300,000 is that 8.63, and you can see that right here, 8.63 on residential and 7.04 right here under this pink column right here. Peach column. So that's your tax rate implication. Okay, at 300. Now, oops. If I change this so we go up 400 to 400,000, you'll see that number goes up to 9.71 and 7.63 respectively, right? And then if I go up to 500, it'll be 10.75. So that's the second scenario, is that 500,000. Now I'm going to just roll over to the tax rate. So these are all of the assessed values for the various properties that we looked at. So these are class 1 is your residential. So we're looking at a change of $132 for that negative 13.46 property. And you can see what the tax rate implications are for those varying from negative 13%, then negative 7%. Flat is $445 requisition. If we're going into the positives, so a 6.55% increase would yield a $567 increase, and then it goes up from there. And let me just show you for business. So these are the implications for the business rates. Let council just read that really quickly. So, and again, these are all reflected in the slide deck that that council saw. So this is with that updated number of an additional $100,000 for the water and $100,000 for the general capital. So, pardon me. So if we, split the difference, that would bring it just under 10% with a 7.64 for business. And then again, this is what we're looking at for the single family residence, is this column here in blue. I can make that bigger for a second if that helps. So I can't do comparative from one to the other, but I can make the changes and you can see the implications.
This is where we're at with on the slide deck here, where the first one here says $39 and then up
Yes.
there it's 86.
So if we increased it, yeah.
Okay,
So that
we
would be your
can-
comparison.
All right.
Yeah.
So we're only talking about $50.
On that bottom tier, yes. That's for a property that went down 13% by BC assessment.
And only $64 for the property that went from 836 to 1.16 million. Because it's at 1,200 here, so it's roughly between $50 and $60
Yeah, I can.
a month.
I'd have to reference that.
Seems doable.
That seems doable. I think
Yeah.
we can go
Yeah.
bigger than that.
So that's based on
Find the limit.
Sorry,
Pitch
400.
Yeah, no, for
Yeah.
real though.
If we went, like I said, to the one that's in the slide deck, so that 10.75 and 8.23. So now it goes up to 132 to 1329.
So just over $100.
Yes.
So
remember, on the bottom end.
Well, no,
Remember, it
I'm looking
compounds.
at the 12. I'm looking
Yeah, I
at
guess
all
it
of
does,
it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's averaging about $100, so just under $10 a month extra to get us out of the hot water.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
I'm a little concerned about the business class though,
yeah,
because
let's
they're
scroll down to business class. So business class is 6. That is correct.
So in this scenario for the businesses, they would go from 7.04 to 8.65. So it's going up like 1.5%. You know, like the difference between the two scenarios is 1.5%,
Correct.
which to my mind doesn't seem troublesome. I'd really be surprised
Well-
if there was someone who said, you know what, this is gonna sink me.
So I don't think that's quite correct for the business class, right? Because it has a multiplier in there. So in the slide deck, you'll see under the property business or potential business property tax implications, the very first property at $866,000. That's this one here. Now it's at $358. It was at $37. So it is a big jump for businesses because remember they have that multiplying effect.
I just feel like a lot of businesses are still recovering from COVID. And I don't think this is going to be a popular decision for them.
At least, businesses are able to pass some of those fees along, whereas residential homeowners have no one to pass those increases along to. So a lot of businesses rely on tourism, and it's the tourists that are taxing our infrastructure, and we need this money to pay for the infrastructure that the tourists are using. So I feel like the businesses maybe do have to pull a little bit more weight than residents.
Based purely on the administrative side and looking at our capital investment needs in the future, I would advocate to go as high as council is comfortable is willing to go, because we're a long ways behind. We should have been allocating capital resources on an annual basis for the last 20 years. Right? When asset management came into being back in 2010, that's when a lot of communities started doing dedicated capital investment based on their asset management plan. So take that for the last 13 years and we would have been in the same place as a lot of other communities. And we haven't made this allocation yet. So do it now and do it as much as council is willing or comfortable looking at. And yes, it does have implications. It does have impacts to businesses, to residences on different, especially this year. But looking at our deficit, we can go back to that slide on the amount of borrowing that we need, and you compound that every single year. Add 5% of borrowing fees for the next 30 years on top of that. Yes, this hurts. Yes, it's a lot to ask. No time like the present to do it. It's not going away, is what I should say. So, but I will, wherever council wants to land.
Just for my own knowledge, I'd like to see the business class with the slightly lower, the 9.7, so the $400,000 difference.
Sorry, I don't understand.
I would like to see what the implications are for the business
Oh,
class
oh.
at the 400,000. We only looked
Sure.
at single family homes.
Right there. So 197. So it started at 37, went up to 197, and then the 300 and change, 348, I believe it was. And remember, like,
358.
yeah, this is that negative 7% is a very small group of businesses. Most of the businesses are in this range right here, right there.
second and third level.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm more comfortable with that, that's the 200,000 in both the water and capital. Instead of 250.
That would be correct.
Yeah, I think I'm more comfortable at that level, which is still up from the 8.63. It's taking it to 9.71. And the business goes from 7.04 up to 7.64.
That's correct.
One other point that I'd make echoes what Councillor Kennington was saying about, you know, your home asset. It's not a liquid asset that translates into more buying power. So if your house increases in its assessed value, and you only care about that house as a residence, then this is not a great situation for you to be in if your house increases in value. But when I see a business increasing in value, I assume that translates to some extent to increased profitability of the business. And so when I look at this slide showing the percent change across the properties, and I see that, you know, most businesses are increasing, I'm sort of thinking, well, it's true that businesses are bringing in tourists that are taxing the infrastructure. B, if businesses are increasing in assessed value, then presumably they're also increasing in profitability, in which case they shouldn't be struggling to pay an increased share, you know, towards something that they all benefit for. Like I could see how a potential increase could hurt a homeowner more than a business, and I also see how a business has more responsibility to pay into that. So I'm not, I hear what your point is about, you know, businesses maybe having margins to worry about, but I'm not.
If I may, I just a point of correction there. So
I was just going to say that.
So the BC assessment doesn't value the profitability of a business. What they value is land and the building. That's it. So you can have a really a high increase in your land and business value and do a terrible year in sales. So one is not linked to the other, and it's incorrect to link those two. So the value of the property, the value of the dwelling, or the business infrastructure that you're seeing there does not correlate to an automatic increase in profitability with respect to the business. They are not linked.
You could borrow against that. You could monetize
That is true.
that.
Yes.
And I think it's naive to ignore that. Like I'm not saying that this pie chart represents, you know, gross profit, but if a business sees its value increase, the business owner is likely going to say, well, how can I monetize this, especially if there's pressure on them to do so. And I feel like if they have the capacity to do that, then by all means let them. If like I don't want to see businesses struggle, but I also don't feel that we need to coddle businesses in our community. If we're gonna ask homeowners to, like, I don't see that this is something that we need to worry too much that we're somehow gonna put, you know, businesses out of business if taxes go up, you know, 1% or 2% more, even if it does translate into a couple $100 a year. But that's just me. I'm hard-hearted like that.
No, I agree with that. I mean, looking at the numbers, none of these numbers look like business killers, and I know business is tough, but so is just being a resident. You know, we're all facing the same pressures from COVID. We're all seeing downturns in the economy. Like, and I feel that businesses do have a responsibility to pay for the infrastructure that supports their business. Full stop. It's not. We're not talking about a ton of money.
Yeah.
I'm still more comfortable at the splitting it down the middle, the 200,000 in each instead of the 250.
I kind of asked for that information because I would consider that the bottom end of what we should be asking for. I agree that I would rather go higher, because I would like to get as ahead as we can in this game, as it were. I feel like it's a monopoly game and we're holding the utilities and we have to pay for them, right?
I mean, the choice is really pay for it now or pay twice later, because, you know, like if we try and save $5 today, it's going to cost us $10 tomorrow. And I don't see any way out of it. And when you pay down something that you're paying interest on, that's money saved. So this is actually going higher is actually going lower
Over the long term.
over the long term, and not even that long of a term, especially when we're talking about reducing our borrowing costs today at higher interest rates, which are pegged to fall by 1 to 1.25 this year and then probably level off for a while. But like right now we're in the highest interest rate environment that we're probably going to see in the next 5 years unless something dramatic happens. So this is just moving the needle in our favor a little bit forward, and I don't like in the long run it's going to cost people less.
I doubt they'll see it that way, but we'll find out.
I think it's our
job.
responsibility
Yeah.
to show them that that's the case, because like the numbers don't lie. The numbers are numbers. They don't care. They don't have feelings. And I think that I agree with you. Everyone's knee-jerk reaction is going to be the same, but I think that's our job, is to walk people through it and say, look, this is actually in your best interest. If you care about the long-term viability of the community and your home within it and your business within it, this is the smart thing to do. And it's not to anyone's benefit, it's to our collective benefit as a community.
Several businesses have had their linens destroyed and guests check out from water situations. I think like we need to act on this, because I think it might actually hurt businesses more if we don't than an extra $100 or $150 a month in property taxes. But
So I do need some direction from council. I might make a suggestion. Is it is better to present to the community the total amount that you're willing to go or to contemplate, and we can present that over the next month. And then council has an opportunity at the end of that consultation period in April, once we get the revised rollout, and you have an opportunity there to reconsider what these tax rate implications are and what the impacts to community and businesses, residential and businesses, would be. If we present the lowest end, then going up after the consultation engagement period is more difficult. I think it would be more problematic for council to show a low end and then go high, than show a high end and then go a little bit lower. So I would recommend that council provide some direction for myself to adjust this requisition number to the highest that you're comfortable with. I'll update the slide deck accordingly, and then we put it out for public input and engagement, find out where their concerns are, what their thoughts are, and then if council would like to reconsider that number before adopting the tax rate bylaws in May, we can do that. But again, I don't think we can go the other way around. We have to go high and then revise down lower, not low and then surprise them with an increase.
We do.
Would you do the 250,000 now? I feel like it's a game show at this point, the way I'm saying it, but
Well, I would say that we present at least the 10.75. So the 500,000 number in that box.
is that a motion?
Well, I'm looking. Do we want to take a look at higher numbers? Or do we want to consider that to be a pretty? So that's an extra 100,000, both water and capital.
It's easy for me to show you what the impacts are, $1 at a time.
Okay, that's a little crazy.
It's yeah, that might be overdoing it. But if
Okay, well, well, here's a question that I'd put to our CFO. Like, what if we're gonna run this town the way you'd run a business, what would be the recommendation of where to pin that number? My gut feeling is that it should be 500 at a minimum. If someone said let's set it at 6 and maybe we walk it back a little bit, and maybe if there's an appetite for 6, then we do it. But I think this is,
well,
me personally, I think I'd pick the highest number out of everyone at this table. So I don't want to say too much, but
if I was being if we were to fully fund our capital plan moving forward, I'd probably double this. Right? Like it's a larger number, and I can show what that would look like. I don't think there's appetite for it. Oops, that's too many zeros.
I don't think you need to do that. I don't think
Okay,
we need to
delete.
double this.
It's
You can't even take this. 10 million.
oops, that's the wrong number.
Everyone's
I'm
That's
sorry,
the wrong number.
that's too many zeros. There we go. So
They're waiting for us up front.
start bringing on.
if we go higher, like I can show this $100,000 at a time increases and see what those impacts are. But to answer Councillor Mafty's question, you would need to double this or more to get to where we need to go in a year, which would mean a substantial increase in taxation this year. And I'll continue to say it's like the sooner we do it, the less painful it is in future years, because it is a compounding factor. So we do it now, then we won't need to continually add on that, $300,000, $400,000 of direct capital increases, because the annual requisition, say it's 4%, is compounded over whatever is collected this year, every year moving forward. So you do have substantial benefits by doing a larger increase earlier. Now, where that lies, I don't know. That's for something council to contemplate. So I can show you as many scenarios as council was willing to look at.
But speaking as CFO, you'd say that a number double that.
Easily.
Okay.
Let's see it, please.
So that would mean a 15.37% increase, 10.83. This is the impacts on businesses. So it'd be 1,100 all the way up to 6,000. The 16, I think, is a little bit, that's with a 135% increase in value, right? So it's a little odd. And then I'll scroll up. This is where the vast majority of our residential properties fall, based on that pie chart that I showed you earlier.
So not even 1.5% change. So
Not even $100 a month.
So what's that based on? How much going into the water in the capital?
That's $1 million allocation. Right, so that would be, if we took out that 300,000, that'd be an additional $700,000.
I'm not comfortable with that. Now you're making the 250 look good,
right?
right? That's what you're doing.
Well, like I said, I'll give as many scenarios as council is willing to consider, and then this is a decision of council. I can only say that we have a significant capital deficit, and we'll need to fund it in multiple years.
Okay, so how about the 250? That's actually on your
That's correct.
chart. So that's 10.748 for residential,
Mhm.
and 0.229 for business.
Correct. And here's the impacts again for all those slides.
I think the way you really want to be able to word this to the public, like, openly and have everyone understand it, because on face value it looks like we have this massive change and it's a big deal. But when you understand the compounding, you realize how important it is to do it. But on the other side, I also agree that there's been some businesses that have just had a crap year, and I'd be totally willing to hear them.
There are always going to be businesses that have a crap year. Next year there'll be businesses that are going to have a crap year, and in 10 years there'll be businesses that are going to have a crap year. That's the nature of business.
I totally get that. I was thinking more like with the fires this year were pretty devastating.
There'll be fires in 10 years.
So, yeah, probably
Like there's
more
never
fires.
it's not like, okay, in 2028 the stars are going to align. It's like the dawning of the age of Aquarius, and everyone's going to make a ton of money, and we'll just postpone everything until 2028 when it's going to be easy and it's going to feel good. Like, this is one of those things where I keep imagining, okay, like, what if this was something that 2 councils ago the council was facing, and I'm like, okay, looking back on this 15 years from now, what would somebody look back and say, those guys made the smart move? And I don't know that anyone would look back and be like, those guys made the smart move by like taking these little tentative baby steps in the face of, sound financial advice from the people that they've hired and paid money to give them financial advice.
Right.
Yeah, but except this is a major step. It's not a baby step compared to what's been done. This is a fairly major step. And it's going to get compounded year after year.
Yeah, but to our benefit, like I see more risk to the community falling behind and not being able to pay for the upkeep and maintenance of the infrastructure in our community versus a few $100s increase for most people. Like I feel like this is relatively minor for the individual, but it adds up to something that's significant for the community. I understand, but I sort of feel like, I don't want to say desperate times call for desperate measures, but I don't know. I'm not too involved or engaged with all of this sort of like climate change activism, but I was following the latest COP conference, and you have all these experts that are brought to the table to give expert opinions, telling people you need to really dramatically cut your use of fossil fuels, and then people say, oh my goodness, this is uncomfortable, why don't we scale back like 1%? And people are saying you need to scale back like 50%, you need to switch to renewables, and people say, well, we're not comfortable with that, so let's take a tiny little baby step. And I feel like this is a similar situation. I know that it's uncomfortable, and I mean it's a little bit scary, but again, this is something that I think what we're talking about now is what we're going to propose to the community that still has a chance to weigh in on it. And at the end of the day, I feel like I'm here representing people in the community. So if we have a public consultation and people say absolutely not, and it's unequivocal, then okay, it's not our job to override them. But I think it's our job to explain what we think is best. And I have to put a lot of stock into what we're hearing from our staff that are suggesting that the more that we can do now, the better off we're going to be. It's difficult for me to ignore that because of the pinch that people are going to feel that adds up to a few $100s.
I think it's going to add up to more than that, but the slide deck that people are going to look at, it's not going to exactly describe what you're hoping it's going to describe. That people are going to look at this and all they want to know is the bottom line, how it's going to affect their property and what the percentage is. And so given that it was a 9% increase last year, if we're going up to 10.748, that's not a big jump, but it gives us that $500,000 in reserves.
and to go 1 million would just be too much sticker shock. Like I'm of the same mind. I'm kind of just the compounding here is really making me think if we go on the high, but we're not married to it, and we advertise the high and just say, hey, this fixes some things that are really going to be painless later. But if there's a significant pushback from the community and the public, and they say, hey, look, this is I can't do this, and we adjust our course accordingly and pull that down, but kind of come in with a slightly higher number.
It's a bit of a reality check, because if we can communicate to the community the situation we're in and what we need to fix it, anything less than that is not going to fix the problem. And we're willing to listen, but people need to know the situation we're in, because if we only raise it by enough to just scrape by, and it's potentially going to, like the next time we have to raise taxes, there might be something that is just, we cannot avoid it because there was a system collapse, and it's like 50%, we have to do it. And this could set us up to be able to sort of smooth out those spikes in our tax needs. I would just like to hear what people have to say. I'm not saying we're going to force, this 15% down everybody's throat, but potentially the community understands. I mean, there's a lot of people that are upset with the water situation. We got water mains blowing out all over the place. People want that fixed, and I wonder if they would prefer to pay a little bit more to get those things finally fixed, as opposed to just putting Band-Aids on them year after year and constantly ruining linens and having businesses have to close because they have no water. I'm just curious as to what people's appetite would be, and if we go in with a low number, then that's all we're going to get.
Yeah, we won't see what their appetite is if we
No.
go in with a low number. I don't know whether, like, it kind of makes me do the one-eyed squint to look at the million, but what's 750? I'm always willing to split the difference. That's me.
Jenna, though, a million is mostly zeros. So
I
you
know
gotta
it
think
is
about
mostly zeros.
Just as an example, Langford increased their property taxes to 11.79 this year.
Yeah, I knew
That's
there'd
a fairly new community with a lot of new infrastructure, and they're still facing challenges of funding just the maintenance and running of basically a brand new city.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's out of line for a smaller community with a higher cost per capita for infrastructure than a city like Langford
Yeah.
to be requesting something like this.
And by doing it now, and we're like, I'd rather pay it to the town than pay it to the bank in interest,
That's a good point.
right?
So 750,000 would mean a 13.17 for residential and 9.59 for business. And looking at the impacts, again, this is just highlighted kind of where the lion's share of residences are. I'll highlight it. Are in this zone. So between $250 to $700 increase in property taxes. And then I'll just scroll down to businesses. Again, most businesses are in this zone right here. So 1,400 to 2,300 or 2,800, sorry.
I guess it's really a question of how much are we willing, what are we willing to put as our high point? And put that out there and find out what people think. And, I know everybody always wants less or to pay less, but they need to understand what paying less means in the long term.
I'm definitely going to be paying in the higher level than what we highlighted from residential property tax, because for some reason they saw some value increase there when really I don't see it myself. But in that scenario, I'd be paying somewhere between 981 and 1.4 million or 1.4, 1,490. So, I'm not arguing this from the standpoint, well, it doesn't really affect me. I think it should go up. This is going to hurt me in a big way, but so is having the entire town devalue to the point where my investment decreases. So
I'm gonna feel this.
you're going to feel it too.
Oh yeah.
Fit them all on one screen for you.
It's just where we set that bar, right? I mean,
I'm just trying to test my own gut here when I'm looking at these numbers. I'm like, could I do it? Could I do it? What would I have to do? You know, what would I have to sell out of my garage? I got a couple of surfboards, you know, like, but you know,
What boards are you selling?
I got a.
this is not a garage sale council table. Just saying.
I think I got a Spitfire for sale. Yeah.
A 6.0?
Yep, it is.
Let's go ahead with this.
2 million. Put the squeeze on them.
As hard as we
I
can.
want to stop. I'm just saying. No, I know. I hear you. I am. It will hurt a little, but
I just want to have the conversation. It's not
Yeah.
that I want it to go there, but I'm willing to go there if the community is willing to go there. And I'm just,
I feel like I'm gonna have this conversation over the apples or the potatoes or the tomatoes.
Yeah, you're definitely gonna.
I'm yeah.
Mr. Lawrence? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry,
Keep
go
going.
ahead. No,
you go
no.
ahead. Will we have the provincial end of this by the time that it comes to public? So will we have the full tax burden at that point, not just municipal? Will we have when does that come out?
Oh, so I have invited the ACRD to come to present to council the ACRD portion of it. So that includes the new transit requisition, includes the hospital district, I believe. I'm not sure when the school requisition comes out. We do have the library, although that's really it's a small impact, but they're going up 17%. But it's a very small requisition. I don't have the impacts of that available for council.
Police and ambulance?
Police and ambulance I haven't received yet, but they should be coming out in the next weeks. So what I can do is update the slide deck with 2 scenarios, have the 500 and the 750 or whatever numbers council wants. And then people will see within the slide presentation the actual impacts, these numbers here that council is seeing before you. And then we do have the open house, which I hope all of council will come, especially if we're presenting the higher numbers.
What's the date of that again?
March 14th.
I'm not going to be here.
And what we can do is draft up some presentation slides for discussion items for council. So, but I do actually need unified direction from council as to what I'm basing this off of. It will come back for consideration by council in April once I get the updated revised roll, and you will also see by that point in time I should have all of the numbers from the school and RCMP, BC assessment, and all those numbers as well.
So why don't you do the comparison for the 500 and the 750?
I'm okay with that. Somehow I think $1 million kind of
I think it's too much.
makes me do the one-eyed squint. So
Yeah.
750 gives us that upper limit that we could fall back from without.
Yep.
Would you be able to do that?
Me? Are you asking?
Oh,
you're
it is.
you're
Everyone.
looking at everyone. here.
Everyone, yeah.
Me personally, I'd push for the $1 million, but I'm not. If I'm the only one, then that's obvious that I'm okay being the outlier in a case like this. But I to my mind, I don't know. I went to the mechanic because my power steering was busted, and he's like, "Well, I can do the fluid change, but I think your pump's broken. And if you pay for the fluid change and it's actually your pump, you've wasted all the money because you're gonna have to redo both jobs." And he's like, "I don't care. You can do none of it." I paid for the whole thing because I was like, I can't afford to pay more later. So that, like, to my mind, that's how I look at it. I don't want to sound cruel, but it's like I don't really care about each individual business or individual person. I'm looking at what the town needs. And so based on what I've heard, I'd say let's propose $1 million because it's a number that it sounds like we can stand behind as being logical. And then if there's no appetite from the public for it, we can walk it back to 0. But I think that I'm okay with whatever you guys want, and I'd lean towards the highest number of all. So that's all I'll say. I don't want to turn this into like a debate between us. That's for sure.
I'm not averse to throwing out the higher number. I mean, it does make me want to do the one-eyed squint, and it's probably going to make everybody want to do the one-eyed squint. But if it makes them pay attention to why we're putting that number out there, because we've put so many zeros behind that one, then maybe that's the reason to put it out there,
Yeah.
right?
That's a good point.
I mean, if we keep it really low, I mean, because we do have the ability to walk it back. And I, as far as I'm concerned, the 500K is as low as we go. And I really don't want to go that low, because I'm with you, Councillor Mafti. I think pay for it now and don't pay for it twice, and pay for all the interest and all the things. Like, let's get a little bit of something so that we can do some of the fixes that everybody wants to see happen.
So what's your number is 1 million? You would.
I know, I
750 or
said I
1
was
million?
doing the one-eyed squint. Well, I'll do the one-eyed squint and go with like $1 million, and whether it's the 500 or the 750, that's the lower one, I don't care.
All right.
But I
You're
will.
1.5.
I know, right? I feel it's wait a minute. We said we weren't at a garage sale. I'm pretty sure we're not at an auction either. Do I hear? I don't know. I mean, we can get behind $1 million in terms of talking about it, because it's a number that makes everybody do exactly like me, the one-eyed squint.
I think one of the positives to come out of this is it's going to get people talking, and people need to talk. As a community, we need to talk to each other about where we're going, and what our needs are, because there's a lot of wants in the community, but sometimes they ignore the needs. And the reality is that we need this money for just the foundation of our community. Swimming pools.
Football stadium.
No, it's not about swimming pools and ice rinks and sports facilities. This is about the foundation of our community, and it's a serious conversation, and this is going to bring people out to talk about it. And the number we end up with is going to be a number that the community decides is right for us, and that'll sort of give us the direction going forward of what the community needs are when we're deliberating on some of the nice to haves.
So everyone's on board with $1 million? I'll go on record by saying I absolutely do not agree with $1 million. But if that's the consensus, then I guess we'll go with that.
I want to see the conversation. So
You're going to hear it.
oh,
Trust
yeah.
me.
No, I know I will, and probably more than the rest of you.
You're going to take the brunt of it.
You know, that's okay. You'll find me at the co-op Monday to Thursday. Just saying.
Because this increase isn't all that's going to increase. It's the ACRD. It's all those other charges that are going to be part and parcel of the tax increase.
So just for clarity, adding that additional $1 million into the budget would yield a 15.37 and a 10.83% increase, respectively, for residential and business. It does make a substantial difference in the capital, and I would comment to council and community that this is a capital requisition. That's all it's going towards. It's not going to anything else. It's not being used for any other purposes. It's not new staff. It's not, in bonuses. Not that we get bonuses and all, but it is purely for capital investment in the ground. This is not really the sexy stuff out there. This is roads, sewer, water, storm, that type of infrastructure. But it is the foundation of our community, and it allows us to continue to live here. So it is a significant request. 15.37, it's at the high end, but it's not unheard of. I'll go back. I remember the previous CFO had the clip out of the newspaper for Tofino that did a 50% increase in taxation, primarily due to their water sanitary plant requisition. And they're going to be paying for that for 30 years because of the borrowing that they had to do to pay for that plant. This helps reduce that need in the future, and it would make a substantial impact. It's not going to address all of it, not even close, but it does make a substantial impact on the capital deficit that we're facing.
And then there's all the money we save by having you do 2 jobs with the CAO and CFO. So that's,
Is that all the direction you need?
I believe so. So I'll craft and update the slide deck utilizing a million. And do you want me to also to include the 500 or the 750 in there as well?
Maybe the 750?
Okay, I'll update it with 750 and a million of additional resources. So that'd be the 15.37 and the
13.17.
Yeah.
yeah. Make sure I get the right numbers here. 13.17.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any further comments?
Don't throw the tomatoes at me tomorrow.
I'm calling my realtor tomorrow.
Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Councillor Hoare, second.
I'll second.
Councillor Anderson, all in favor? None opposed, that carries, and that is at 6:30. The February 26, 2024 special council meeting is adjourned at 6:30.
Thank you, Council. We didn't reference them, but just so you know what this is. This is how we're funding all of our capital right now. Through each page is a different year. So it goes through 24 to 2028. And it just shows how we're funding the various things. So it's more for information's sake than anything else.
Somebody had a heart attack.
And you'll notice when we get to 27 and 28 that it's all under borrowing. So what I can do is try to show what the impact would be. It will be a little bit of work. I'm going to see if I can figure out what that impact is year after year for it, so you can have something solid to